It was last winter. Do you remember last winter? It was a frigid season, to say the least. There were 3 homicides within a week. I believe it was the first week of December. You know that week where the snow just wouldn't stop falling? The snowplows couldn't even clear the goddamn white away. We received the first call on a Monday afternoon. I can't give you specific names, of course, but a lady called from her house around 1 o'clock reporting the sound of a washing machine coming from her basement. She told us that she didn't have a washing machine. She said she was sure of the noise, though, the loud hum of one of those contraptions. We told her to stay upstairs and the car would be over to check things out. The problem was, the roads were so bad it took us about 3 hours to get there. We knocked on the door and waited, but no one came. We knocked again. Nothing. Me and my partner at the time drew our weapons and kicked in the door. The house was deathly quiet, and we did the routine walkthrough, checking corners, being cautious and all that. We went to the basement last, where the noise was reported to be coming from. Sure enough, there was a woman who called us dead. I remember she was lying on the floor in the fetal position with her hands over her face like she couldn't bear to look at what killed her. We called in backups and the forensics team. They found a strange salt-like powder in the corner of the basement that they took back to the lab. The lady's autopsy wouldn't be completed for a few days. I could see there were no visible signs of struggle, no obvious cause of death either. We got the second call on the Wednesday of the same week. The snow was even worse by then. This call was different, though. It was a man, about 40, telling us he found his mother dead in the bedroom upstairs. He was crying his heart out. We went over. This one was in the old housing district downtown. It was closer than going out to the burbs, but it took us about the same time because of the weather. Usually, I'm not the one who investigates what are reported as natural deaths, but I insisted, just because of the Monday homicide. So we got over there, and sure enough, poor man's mother was in the upstairs bedroom, on the floor in the exact way the lady in the basement was. The same powder was found in the far corner of the room. My first thought was the obvious one. Maplewood could have a serial killer on the loose, but I thought I'd wait for the test results of the powder and the autopsy before I made definite connections. The visible connections were there, but not the inside facts. Before I left, I asked the son if he talked to his mother that day. He said that he had a few hours before he found her. He said she called him and told him there was a sound of howling wind coming from the upstairs bedroom, but that she hadn't opened that window in years. Being the nice guy he was, the son said he'd come over and check what it was, but it took him nearly 2 hours to get there. I went through the bedroom and checked the window. It was covered in dust. Hadn't been touched in a long time. So, the next day, we get the reports back from the lab. The cause of death was inconclusive, but they did find something I've never seen before in my years on the force. The victim seemed to be missing more than half of their bone marrow. At least that's what they tell me. There were no entry wounds in the body. The powder was even more strange. It didn't register with any known substance to man. It was completely new to this world. I told him to test the newest victim's body and the powder that was found with that one too, but I already knew the same results would come back. I put out a memo to the entire station that if anyone receives a call about a strange noise in their home, for the responding officer to immediately tell the caller to leave their home and go to the nearest, safest home, and that squad cars would be there as soon as possible. Of course, things don't always go as planned, especially in Maplewood. One of my officers didn't receive the memo or ignored it. It's too late to care at this point. She received a call from some 20-something-year-old kid living in his new apartment. Said that he heard old classical music coming from his bedroom closet. Said it sounded like it was being played from an old phonograph. You know what my officer said? She told him to go see what it is, but to stay on the line. I listened to the recording of the call, and it's been a consistent sound in my nightmares ever since. It started off by the sound of the kid walking and explaining what he was doing. He was right though, as he got closer I could hear the music. It was old classical music from the late 19th century. The music got louder and louder as he approached the door. You could hear the closet squeak open, and then the music stopped. There was exactly 1 second of silence, so deafening my ears hurt, and then a scream. It wasn't the kid though, it was whatever was in the closet. I have never heard a noise like this in my entire life. The phone cut out right after it happened. Sure enough, the crime scene looked like all the rest. Body crumbled over in white powder where the sound was coming from. A few days after I'd given a warning to the public that if they hear any strange noise to leave their home and call the police from the next house over. I said don't bother getting dressed for the cold, just get out of the house. Some people got mad over that. I don't know why. I was just trying to keep them safe. So, on the immediate Sunday, we get a call at the station. It's a woman out of breath, saying there's the sound of a baby crying coming from her upstairs. She says that she has a baby, but it's at her sister's house right now. I knew that this was it. This was where I was going to find out what was doing this. I could feel it in my bones. The weather was bad. Well, not just bad, it was the buildup of a week of bad. I arrived with my partner and 4 supporting officers around 7 p.m. I remember it being darker than it should have been. We entered the house, and as soon as the door opened, I could hear a baby crying from upstairs. If it was the mother's baby, it had been crying for 2.5 hours. Something wasn't right here. I drew my weapon, and the other officers followed in action. We went up the stairs and stopped at the closed door. The baby continued to cry. I remember my heart was beating real fast as I counted down with hand movements. 3, 2, 1. I opened the door and entered the room with my gun held up. As soon as the door opened, the sound of the baby left the air and I stared face to face with an unfathomable form. It was in the corner of the room and stood about ceiling level. It had pale white skin and no clothes. It had no eyes or nose, but it had more mouths than I'd like to mention. Mouths and holes of various sizes were what made up its body and what it had of limbs. In that 1 second of silence, I fired my weapon, and the other officers followed. The thing in the corner's torso opened, and it let out the same scream as I heard on the phone. It blocked out the gunfire, but it soon came to a whimper, and it collapsed to the floor, breaking the baby crib in the process. As it died, it made an array of sounds so wide I fell to my knees in disbelief. I heard everything from animal noises to machinery to nature and sounds I've never heard before. Sounds I can't remember now, but at the time couldn't even make sense of. The creature then dissolved into that white powder, but much more than what were at the other scenes. We never found out what it was. I just know it could mimic any sound on Earth and beyond perfectly. I don't know how it got here, or why it took people's marrow, or what it was made out of, but I do know one thing. Next time you hear a noise that isn't quite right, you think twice about investigating it.